Palestine, humanitarian catastrophe. Venezuela rejected the extension of the executive order being used by the United States government since 2015 to justify its aggression against the Bolivarian nation. And in Haiti, several armed criminal groups attacked the National Police Academy in Port-au-Prince amidst the sharp escalation of violence. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. At least 6 Palestinians were killed on Wednesday in Israeli airstrikes and shootings targeting civilians and their homes in the central Gaza Strip, according to local and medical sources. Additionally, an Israeli shelling targeting a house sheltering displaced people, predominantly women and children, west of Nuseirat refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip, resulted in 5 civilians' deaths and several injuries. Meantime, another Palestinian was killed and 9 were wounded when the Israeli military fired at civilians waiting for aid near the Kuwaiti roundabout south of Gaza City. The injured were transported to the Al-Shifa medical complex. Earlier, 4 Palestinians were killed and over 20 others were injured when the Israeli occupation forces opened machine gun fire on civilians desperately waiting for aid trucks at the Nablusi roundabout west of Gaza City. Jordan condemned on Wednesday the Israeli government's ongoing settlement plans in the occupied Palestinian territories. The condemnation by Jordan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates came after the Israeli government's decision to approve the construction of approximately 3,500 new settlement units in the West Bank. The ministry stated that these unilateral and illegal measures violate international law, including Security Council Resolution number 2334 and other relevant international references. It also emphasized that such actions undermine the prospect for peace and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. The ministry reiterated the call for the international community to fulfill its responsibilities by halting these ongoing violations of international law, underscoring the urgent need for international protection for the Palestinian people, especially with the approach of the month of Ramadan. The United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, has described the food shortage in Gaza as a nutritional crisis and part of a wider humanitarian catastrophe. UNRWA spokeswoman Tamara Al-Rifai said from Cairo that the situation is so dire and desperation so high that any truck crossing becomes an attraction for the hungry. According to Al-Rifai, 90% of the population in Gaza today faces a high level of acute food insecurity. She said access to northern Gaza has been a real challenge. The UNRWA spokeswoman added that Israeli authorities have rejected more than half of the United Nations request to bring food, medical supplies and clean water to the north, and the UNRWA has not been allowed to reach the area since January 23. At least 30,717 Palestinians have been killed and 72,156 wounded in Israeli attacks in Gaza since October 7th. But what do the experts say about the famine declaration in Gaza? The resolution of famine existence requires analysis through a technical process, and only government authorities and top United Nations officials can declare one. Food insecurity experts working on the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, identify a famine in an area on the basis of the existence of 3 conditions. First, at least 20% of households must face an extreme lack of food. The second requirement is when at least 30% of children suffer from acute malnutrition. And third, and last, the conditions are presented when at least 2 adults or 4 children for every 10,000 people die each day from starvation or disease linked to malnutrition. But in an update report of the situation in Gaza presented by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations based in the IPC projections, it is stated that the 100% of the population in the area is on IPC phase 3 or above, which means that households either have food consumption gaps reflected by acute malnutrition or are marginally able to meet minimum food needs, but only by depleting essential assets or through crisis coping strategies. Main findings in the report as of 7 February are that the entire population in Gaza faces high levels of acute food insecurity inside of a situation of crisis or worse. At the same time, over 50% around in emergency phase and at least 1 in 4, which would be 500,000 people, faces catastrophic conditions experiencing extreme lack of food, starvation and exhaustion of coping capacities. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. Venezuela rejected the extension of the executive order being used by the United States government since 2015 to justify its aggression against the Bolivarian nation. In a statement released by the Foreign Ministry, Caracas pointed out that this order violates all norms of international law. It also affirmed that this decision demonstrates that the declining leadership of the United States is not capable of designing a coherent foreign policy that was not based on economic terrorism, blackmail, or disrespect. On the other hand, the Bolivarian government stressed that the Venezuelan people will not bow down in the face of these aggressions and that their moral conscience and perseverance are the solid base on which they will continue to achieve victories. The President of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, congratulates the government of Venezuela on the announcement of the date of the presidential elections. The Brazilian president, during a meeting with the Spanish President Pedro Sánchez, stressed that Venezuela needs a democratic election to regain a space for participation in world forums. The head of state gave a message to the Venezuelan opposition and urged them not to imitate the Brazilian opposition, which usually denies electoral processes, in a clear allusion to Bolsonarism. Lula made reference to the extreme right-wing leadership in naming a substitute to participate in the presidential elections.
I just told you that here in this country they prevented me from participating in the 2018 elections. And instead of crying, I nominated another candidate to participate in the elections. In Venezuela, the elections are scheduled for July the 28th. I learned about that yesterday. Now, your question is whether the elections will be honest or not. I hope the elections will be as democratic as possible. And according to what President Maduro told me at the meeting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, he will summon all the observers of the world that want to observe the electoral process in Venezuela.
In Argentina, workers of the Secretariat of Culture denounced actions by the government of Javier Milei to lay off 1,200 employees in the sector. The State Workers Association warned that Milei's government will perpetuate a new wave of layoffs when it lays off more than 1,200 employees from the Secretariat of Culture. The union assured that two high-level government executives have told them about the measure and that it will be made official in the next few days. Workers of the Secretariat of Culture also accepted that in many areas there have not yet been any submissions and the work of the employees is unknown.
The truth is very distressing. We belong to a former ministry that has become a secretariat, and it has 4,000 workers. They propose 30% cuts without any problem, as if people were numbers, as if behind each person there was not a family, when in reality what we have here are workers who guarantee rights, who guarantee access to culture, and without any reason or anything, they gave us a contract for 3 months to evaluate us. They didn't appoint directors. They said that the evaluations are sort of done. They know who they have to fire. Who do they have to fire? Everybody's needed here.
Argentina's integral medical assistance program is the one that suffers the most damage from the measures imposed by the government of Javier Milei. Pensions and PAMI benefits are the two items with the largest drop in public spending by the government so far this year. The total amount of the cuts made by the government of Javier Milei in both items amounts to 1,682 million Argentine pesos. The Argentinian Institute of Fiscal Analysis stated that the collapse of real spending on pensions could be halted with exceptions, tax benefits, and sources of financing that guarantee fiscal balance. The Peruvian parliament approved, with the support of right-wing branches, the return of bicameralism and the immediate election of congressmen. With 91 votes in favor, the full Congress approved in a second round of votes on Wednesday the reinstatement of the upper and lower chamber after 3 decades. The new legislature will be made up of 130 deputies and 60 senators for a period of 5 years and with immediate re-election. The decision will be effective after the elections of 2026. With such a ruling, Congress disobeys the result of the popular referendum held in 2018 that rejected the return to bicameralism. In Italy, more than 29,000 people were reported missing in 2023. Of them, almost 22,000 are minors and over 17,000 are foreign children. The Office of the Extraordinary Commissioner for Missing People warned that 75% of the cases are people under 18 years of age. They also reported that the foreign minors came from Tunisia, Egypt, Guinea, Ivory Coast, and Afghanistan. On the other hand, the authorities warned that a significant number of these missing children join the ranks of criminal organizations, are victims of human trafficking or of organ smuggling. The foreign ministers of Russia and Nigeria met in Moscow to discuss future relations between the two countries. After the meeting, Nigerian Chancellor Yusuf Tugar detailed that the relationship between the two nations will continue to grow. Similarly, Tugar assured that his country is in a suitable position to have a strategic relationship with Moscow. For his part, Russian Chancellor Sergei Lavrov said that Nigeria is a priority partner for Russia and on the African continent. Likewise, Lavrov confirmed that Moscow will continue to provide assistance to the countries of Sahara region and Sahel.
Russia is making and in any case will continue to make a constructive contribution to the efforts of the Africans and the entire world community to stabilize the situation in the Sahara-Sahel region. It will provide assistance to the countries of the region to increase the combat capability of their national armed forces, to their security forces, and to the law enforcement authorities in order to counter the threats they still face.
We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome to From the South. Haiti's multidimensional crisis worsens by the hour as paramilitary groups control over 80% of the capital and prevent Prime Minister Ariel Henry, currently in Puerto Rico, from returning to the country. The Prime Minister's hopes to return dwindle as flights to Haiti are currently banned. In late February, Henry left the nation to travel to Guyana for a CARICOM summit, where he announced general elections for August 2025. From there, the Prime Minister traveled to Kenya, where he signed with President William Ruto an agreement to send 1,000 police officers to Haiti. However, since last Thursday, the crisis has worsened, with the report of several shootings in Port-au-Prince and the release of thousands of inmates. The violence has caused the displacement of more than 15,000 people. On Sunday, government authorities declared a curfew and a state of emergency. The head of the armed criminal groups in Haiti, Jimmy Cherisier, known as Barbecue, threatened a bloody civil war if the Prime Minister does not resign. The United Nations Security Council is holding an emergency meeting Wednesday on the situation in Haiti, ravaged by gang violence that threatens civil war unless Prime Minister Ariel Henry resigns. As United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres this week called for urgent action, in particular by providing financial assistance to the multinational security support mission. United Nations representative in Haiti, Maria Isabel Salvador, will brief the Security Council on the developments remotely at its closed-door meeting scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. Armed gangs, which control large parts of Haiti, announced last week a joint effort to overthrow Henry, and since then, the airport, prisons, police stations, and other strategic targets in the capital Port-au-Prince have come under attack. Haitians face water shortages and escalating violence with paramilitary groups in the capital. Metropolitan Port-au-Prince is facing a shortage of drinking water. The crisis persists again, where several families in the neighborhood fill their containers despite the sharp increase in the prices of this vital liquid. In less than 3 days, the price of water has risen 25% due to the closing of several water distribution stations in the city. As with water, some basic necessities have experienced an excessive increase in price since mid-February. In the meantime, Dominican Republic Civil Aviation Board issued a resolution in which immediately suspends the operations of passenger and cargo flights to and from Haiti. In this sense, the Dominican government is based on Article 9 of the International Convention, which allows states to reserve air traffic in circumstances that compromise safety. Commercial flights from the Dominican Republic have been suspended since last Friday due to the increase of criminal groups' violence in Haiti. In the context of the ongoing violence in Port-au-Prince, Kenyan President William Ruto told U.S. officials that his troops could be ready to leave within 72 hours to support Haiti. This statement follows the signing of a bilateral agreement between Kenya and Haiti. The White House, while counting on Kenya's commitment, rules out any deployment of U.S. forces, pledging to accelerate the multinational support mission. However, despite the urgency of the situation, financial obstacles stand in the way of Kenyan troop deployment. President Ruto stressed that without adequate funding, his troops would not be able to leave the country. Senegalese parliament passed on Wednesday an amnesty law covering acts linked to deadly protests in the last 3 years. The controversial text was approved with 94 votes in favor and 49 against and is aimed at calming the crisis sparked by the presidential election delay. The law has faced criticisms that it is shielding perpetrators of serious crimes, including homicides. The amnesty is part of President Macky Sall's response to the turmoil sparked by his last-minute postponement of the presidential election, originally scheduled for February 25th. The law would grant an amnesty for all offenses of crimes, whether tried or not, committed between February 1, 2021 and February 25, 2024, relating to demonstrations or having political motivations. China affirmed on Wednesday about the increase of tensions in the South Sea due to the violation of territorial sovereignty by the Philippines. Through channel spokesperson Mao Ning, the Asian nation accused the Philippines of violating sovereignty and asserted that this led to the collision of ships from both countries in the Southern Sea. China asserted that sovereignty in these waters are historical and have been established according to international law endorsed by the Charter of the United Nations. The diplomatic added that the United States is using the Philippines in the Southern Sea to increase the hostilities between both Asian nations that have increased since the beginning of the term of office of the new president backed by the United States. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.